Good morning, guys. Today I have another splicing project to do. These are our lazy jacks. I built them when we were in Puerto Rico out of some very crappy, maybe nylon line that I found at Home Depot. It's very stretchy. It doesn't work very well. It worked well enough to keep our sales from falling on deck for the last year and a half, but now it's time to replace them and moving the points where these lazy jacks attach up higher on the boom to keep it all organized and clean. So yeah, I'll show you what I have down below, what I'm going to be using, and the plan I have to make these a little bit better. Alright, this is my plan for the lazy jacks. A topping lift coming all the way to the top, coming down to about here. That piece there is going to be made out of this 3/16 just normal double braid line. The actual lazy jacks themselves are going to be made out of Dyneema, 1/8" Dyneema. Super strong, super durable, very slippery and very lightweight, zero stretch. Awesome stuff. And then we've got these little frictionless or low friction aluminum eyes that I'll be using at each one of these junction points along the way. And then some eye straps like these. So along the boom, we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4 of those little eye straps, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 those low friction eyes. That's the overall plan. I've got the sketch here on the iPad, and I've got my measurements that I need. This is the test that we have running outside. These are the lengths and the spacing that we used. Seemed to work pretty well. It held the sail in place. The only problem was that since I used a very, very stretchy line from, I think maybe Home Depot or something like that in Puerto Rico, it doesn't work very well to keep the sail in when you're dropping it. The spacing is correct, the lengths are all correct, it's just too stretchy of a line, which is why replacing it with Dyneema. Super easy to splice, super strong, super light. And I'm going to be splicing these low friction eyes into each one of these sort of connecting points along here, so that when they hoist up, the whole thing snaps into place and it works like a charm. I'll put this sketch in the vault if you guys want to take a look at it and see what our design was for the whole system. So first things first, it's time to splice a bunch of Dyneema. The splice that I'll be using to put these little eyes into the Dyneema is called a locking splice. And it looks a little something like this. Let me zoom in on that. It looks a little like this. It's pretty straightforward to do, and it only requires 2 more steps than a normal Dyneema splice. And the best part is that you don't have to then go around and whip this to keep it from sliding out. Because Dyneema splice is really, really strong when it's under tension, but when it slacks off, it can actually come apart. And we actually had one come apart that I didn't whip, or actually the whipping fell off of it before on our spinnaker pole. So this locking splice I just learned how to do. I'll walk you through the steps right now. Okay, this end is going to be used for where the Dyneema attaches to the boom. So I'm going to be putting one of these eyes through it, not one of these. Oh shit, where'd it go? So first thing is you want to measure 70 times the diameter. This is 1/8. And that's going to be the part you bury. So for me, that's 8 3/4 of an inch, which is right here. I've already marked it. All right, so here's the tricky part. Let me zoom in here. Here's my mark. You go in at the mark, try to get an even number of strands on each side. Oh, this is not cooperating at all. Come here. All right, you go in at the mark, come inside. Then you take the tail end and you pull it through. Creates this nice little loop. Pull that all the way through. And make it go around and in on itself. Then you take the next size up fid. In this case, I think it's a number, whatever. Take the next size up fid and you put it through the little hole you just made. And this time, you take the opposite end. So this is your tail end. You take a loop in this end and pass it through. And here's where the magic happens. Now you pull this through and it reverses on itself again. And look at that. Now, what this kind of looks like is if you just took this end and passed it through, but in fact it's a little bit different. So the tail end here actually has the other end going through it. And that's half of why this creates a lock. So now I'm going to put the Sharpie in here to create a loop. I'm going to slide this down onto itself. Now you take the tail end here, you put your fid just through there. Take the tail end, push it through. So what that did, it is actually create this lock. See how that works? So when they pull together, it actually locks in place. It's pretty freaking slick if you ask me. So what that creates is this actual locking mechanism. So the Dyneema is actually locked together so it can't slide apart. And then all you do is you take your tail end and you bury it as you would a normal Dyneema splice. Put in the fid. You just go up a couple of strands and you just start working the Dyneema onto the fid. Once you just have a little bit left down here, pop the fid out, pull it through like that, and then you just taper the end. This style is pretty easy. I like to start back here, pull it as tight as you can, start pulling one strand out at a time, and then you go up a couple of strands, just pull out the next one. Now, one last important step before you bury this tapered end in is to make sure you pull it tight, because if you don't, you'll create a little bit of a bump where this one comes out. So make sure it's pulled nice and tight, and then just start working out from this end. I like to put my Sharpie back in there. The more you pull, tail end gets buried. It's a nice little locked splice. Don't have to whip it. It'll stay nice and tight all by itself. Alright guys, so that is how I make these little locked splices. These ones here are gonna go in these eyes and get screwed into the mast, and then on the other side I've got these low friction loops spliced in the same manner, and that is what the next piece of Dyneema gets slid onto. So when the lazy jack gets pulled tight, it's gonna have a nice slippery loop to go through like that. That's the basic gist of it. This was my first one, and now I have 6 more to make. So the last splices I need to make are to splice these low friction rings into the end of this sort of topping halyard that's going to pull the whole lazy jack into place. Now this is 3/16, just normal like yacht braid or something like that, and the outside is braided, but the problem is that the core is not braided. It's just a twin strand, probably polyester, nylon, Dacron, whatever it is. But since it's not braided, you can't splice it like a normal double braid splice. So I'm gonna walk you through the technique that I found that seems to work pretty well, especially since these are just lazy jacks. They're not holding an outrageous amount of load. And basically it's the same sort of locking splice we used before, but instead of tapering the end, you just do 2 or 3 more passes and then finish it just with some heat shrink, or you can whip it if you like that better. So yeah, I'll walk you through how I splice this line onto these low friction. As you can see, the outside sheath is braided, but the inside core is just 2 twists. And so you can't splice this the same way as you would normal double braid. And what I found that works pretty well is to just pull the core out and then splice the outside the same as you would the Dyneema. So if this is going to be the length of my splice, I'm just going to pull 2 lengths of the core out and just cut that off. Milk it back through. So now the core stops right about here, and the rest of this has no core left in it. That's not ideal. This is going to lose some of its strength in that situation, but again, it's only the halyard to hoist the lazy jacks in place. So in reality, it's only ever going to hold a couple 100 pounds. It's not going to get anywhere close to its breaking strength or even its rated working load. So the outside sheath will be plenty strong enough to hold this in place. All right, so the core stops about there. I'll make my splice about here. And then you just work it the same way that we were working the Dyneema earlier. Now this, because it's braided a little bit tighter than Dyneema, it's a little bit more of a pain in the ass to work with. Pull it through, create that nice little loop. Now the trick is to get this giant fid through there. There we go. All right, so that's how it looks now. Take this end, put a loop in it, and then finish by passing it through here, and then just pulling this back on itself. Ta-da! Now we're left with something very similar to what we had with the Dyneema. Slide the low friction ring in there, pull that tight. Now we have the same locking splice that we did with the Dyneema. This alone is super duper strong, and even if we try to pull it apart, it's going to take quite a bit of force. And it still doesn't come apart. So this right now would probably hold several 100 pounds just by itself. I'll do maybe 1 or 2 more passes similar, just keep taking this loose end, passing it through itself once or twice, and then finish it off with just like a piece of heat shrink tubing. All right, that is pretty much what it looks like when it's done. I know that this splicing technique probably weakens the line a little bit, but I don't think it's going to matter enough in this application since it's only hauling up our lazy jacks, and those really don't take much load at all. If you guys have a better idea on how to splice such a pain in the ass line together, let me know in the comments down below. I'm interested to hear what you guys come up with. Let's zoom out. Now that I'm done splicing all these together, it's time to go install these on the boom and get this thing rigged back up. All right, so we are ready to install these little Dyneema cords that I made back onto the boom to act as our lazy jacks. The old ones that we had were installed down here on the bottom, and it wasn't very beneficial because when the sail came down, it could actually push off the side, and the reefing lines got in the way, and it just created like a big ugly mess. So we're gonna move these little eyes, what is this called? Straps. We're gonna move these little eye straps up onto the top of the boom so that everything's clean and everything stays out of each other's way. You ready to help?
Yeah, I'm here too.
So if you've seen the sketch in the vault, it'll give you a pretty good idea of what order these go together, but you do kind of have to be careful putting it together because each one of the ends is spliced and that gets screwed onto these little eye straps. I think they're called eye straps. It's kind of tricky to put this together, but you do just have to pay attention to what order they go together and what piece gets threaded onto what other piece, so that when it's done, the whole thing goes up smoothly.
And then
Where are you off to?
I am going up the mast because I'm the lightest of the two of us. No, I'm going to put this line, which is the Lazy Jack halyard hoisting line, I guess, up on top of the mast. So then it's gonna hoist me up and then I'm gonna enjoy the view. So beautiful. All right, moment of truth. We just hoisted the main and now we're about to test the Lazy Jack. Let's do it. Yeah, ready. Yeah, it doesn't like stretch. I mean, obviously, I think normally we'll probably flick it as we go out like we did before, but it's cool to know that if we need to just drop the main and we just let go of the halyard and it just poof,
Yeah.
just like that.
That works a lot better than before.
Yeah.
The old ones where the line was like nylon or something from Home Depot, and it was actually like really grippy, so it wouldn't like let the sail just slide down. And having them tied up on the top helps a lot too. Now it's out of the way of the topping lift and the reefing lines and stuff. Sweet!
It's good.
What would you say, Kika? Would you call that
Successful mission.
Makes me want the mass sheeting. That looks good too, actually.